right. Well, we got another one getting ready to get knocked out. I believe this is 60. Did one over the phone with Gavin last night and got Mitch on. He's had a pretty decent season so far, better than most, and I figured we'd fill some podcast info with people's hunting stories. So we'll let Mitch kind of jump in and let us know how everything kind of went from starting of the season and on up to now, really.
Yeah. Season actually started a little. I felt like I was behind the eight ball with deer on camera. Running a lot of cameras. I had quite a few good bucks last year. I'd say about 5 or 6 3-year-olds and 2 or 3 that we knew were 4.5 and one 5-year-old for sure. And all summer, all the way up into maybe late August, early September, I didn't have a single one on camera. So I was sort of in panic mode on what to do. I know we put a lot of time in last year. My area was hit by derecho pretty good. So myself, a good buddy of mine, and my son did a lot of timber work this past winter. And I think that what that did is it pushed some of my deer off onto the neighbors. We did a lot of cleanup. There's a lot of down trees, treetops, and everywhere around me was like that. It was all just thick. You couldn't access it. You couldn't get through it. So I decided to do some cleanup, and I think that had a big effect on my deer being in my area, my timber. And so anyways, fast forward, we get our food plots in, and I had a new blind built and just sort of laid out of the area for quite a while, let things settle down. And one of my bucks I had on camera a couple years ago, last few years, showed up again. I call him Swoops, and he was a 6.5-year-old deer. And at 4.5, we thought he was a good deer, and we let him pass. My son almost had an opportunity at shooting him and couldn't get it done. And I elected to pass him. At the time, he was just a mainframe 10, and the ends of his beams curled up. And he would freak at my food plots a lot, especially late season. And I figured if he keeps that pattern, then last year we could have killed him. And last year, lo and behold, I had 2 big 10s show up. One I was not familiar with, and we had a big 4x9 we called Jerry. And those are my target bucks. And I was them or nothing. Season went by, nothing happened. And then we come into this season, and then Swoop shows back up again, and he's 6.5 years old. And he hadn't really changed. And I have some pictures I shared with you guys from 2 years ago to last year to this year. There might have been a 10-inch difference in the 2 years. So it was just one of those. He's 6.5. He's not going to get any bigger in our mind. He actually lost a tine. He had an inside tine on his left main beam between his G1 and G2, and that was gone. So he was just back to a clean 10. And he showed up right in the backside of the property where he normally does on this ridge, and coming down to my small food plot. It was a Sugar Mama plot I planted this year. And he did that 2 or 3 days in a row, sort of last 30 minutes of daylight to dark. And talking with some guys on the team, I elected to just wait till we had a cold front. I didn't have a good wind. It was early October, I think it was right around the 15th. And we had that cold front come through on a Sunday. I sat it out. I didn't go out. And I went in on Monday night, and I saw a lot of deer. I saw a real old deer I have. He's 8.5. He has a nickname, Teabag. That's a story for another time. But he showed up, a lot of other young bucks. But Swoops never showed. I got out of there clean that night, and I decided to go back the next night. It was still cold, same wind. And I had a lot of deer moving. That was a Tuesday night. A good 4-year-old 8. 2 years ago when Austin was out with me, he came right around my stand. That same buck, he's gotten pretty wide, big, but he's got small 3, so we're gonna let him go again this year. If my son decides to shoot him, so be it. But we're gonna give him a pass. Hope he blows up. But he was all around in front of me. I couldn't move, and a couple other 3-4-year-old or 3 or 4 other little bucks showed up, and they were sparring right underneath my stand within 30 yards. So I was sort of pinned down. I couldn't move, and I could hear something in the food plot behind me. And I just kept peeking over my shoulder. And there's a bunch of does feeding. And then I just you get that sick feeling like you need to turn around, you need to look. And I look over my shoulder, and there he is. He's in the corner of my food plot. He came on off that ridge behind me, not out from in front of me like I expected him to do. So long story short, I get turned around. I thought I had the camera on. I either double punch record or didn't hit it. And it's my first year self-filming, like completely with a camera, not just GoPros. And I got a big monitor on the top. And in my mind, I just looked over at the monitor. He's in the screen, he's centered of it. I grabbed my muzzle loader, and it was during early muzzle loader season, so I have the landlord tenant tag. And I get on him, and I'm on him for a good I don't know, minute and a half. I have a GoPro over my head. I was watching that footage. You can see me. I'm just sitting there staring at him through the scope, and he was facing me dead on, and I didn't want to take a frontal shot. He's only 65 yards. He turns sideways. I crack a shot off, and he only goes about 70 yards, does a horseshoe, and dies on the hillside behind him. So turn the camera around, I'm celebrating, calling some friends, and then I notice I didn't hit record. So my first thought is I got to tell Jesse this, and it was just one of those years where we've got quite a few guys on some good deer, and not getting the content really, it felt like it kicked me right in the backside. And I invest time and money into this, you guys all know. And then when you don't get the shot, I know things happen. Sometimes things happen fast, but I'm staring at this deer for a minute and a half. They would have just taken one more glance. So I learned my lesson on that one. Make sure you hit record. Make sure that red light's in the camera. But anyways, we get down. I had called my wife and we recovered him and said he's big bodied. I think we weighed him out right around 280 pounds, 281 was his weight. Big bodied deer. He only went 145. So like I said, he wasn't going to get much bigger. We guessed him. I didn't think he was going to hit that 150 mark. And at 6.5, I figured it was time to let him have it. So really happy with that deer. We got him out. And 2 days later, the big 10 I was hunting last year, who hadn't showed up at all, shows up on my camera right in the back of the property where I first got swoops. And just a big mainframe 10. Didn't really have a name for him. And then in all this social media and Tyson, Jake Paul, my kid was like, we should call him Tyson. He's just a big, heavy deer and, big mainframe 10. No correlation. So we just called him Tyson. He just got a name. So we knew which deer we're talking about. Well, he started showing up. So that really got my gears running. Like, how am I going to kill this deer? I don't want to mess it up. We're going in quiet. So I hunted for him a couple times with no luck. I saw some other good deer, nothing really big. And then we have Austin Waniger, another team member. He drew his Iowa tag this year. So he was coming out to hunt with myself or Dylan, some other guys. I just told him, you make the best of whatever you can do in your zone. We have a few guys that have the zone you're in. Whatever opportunity you can make, take it. So he hunted with me a few days. We saw some good deer, but never laid eyes on Tyson. And then I think it was November 3rd. I got a picture of him in the morning going up that same hillside that swoops used to always come down off of. And that was it. That's the last time I saw him. So anyways, fast forward a few more days, I'm going into hunt a set in the evening where I left my Ozonics hanger in the tree. Austin's hunting another spot. He was doing an all-day sit. He saw a giant there the day before, so he wanted to hunt the whole day. I had to work, so I got off work on the afternoon. On my way in, there's deer movement everywhere. I couldn't even get to my stand. I had a buck that one I called breeder on a doe, and there's 3 or 4 other younger bucks trying to circle her. He's running them off, and I'm maybe 50 yards from my tree stand. I can't move any further. So I take the pack off, and then I get a picture on my camera, which is right below me where the deer are at. And there's another buck, and they're a big 10 that I've never seen. I thought was a big 10. Let's just put it that way. And anyways, it's just a lot of deer movement, a lot of things happening all at once. This 10 comes out of the brush running off my 8 that I had down there, and he decides to follow this doe up the trail. And I come to full draw, end up making a 50-yard shot on him. Pretty sure I pinwheeled him. Didn't see him go down. So I waited till dark. I got Austin. We went and looked. We were in some bunch of like multiflora rows and thick brush and stuff and CRP grass. And after about 90 yards, we couldn't find him. Very little blood, so we backed out. And then the next morning, Austin was out hunting, and on his way out of the stand, he looked over and happened to see my deer. So he only went 30 yards from where we last found blood, 30, 40 yards, I guess. So got him. Again, it was one of those, I got caught up in the moment. He had a bit of ground shrinkage. I haven't even taped him. I think, Jesse, you came down with Greg and some of the other guys, help with the recovery with him. And I know there was some fun to be had with that one, a lot of laughs. We all have those moments where they look maybe a little bit bigger on the ground than they do when you sort of stop and take a minute and look at them. But I got him out actually in the garage right now. I did a European Mountie. I got him soaking in the bleach and peroxide solution on him right now, all wrapped up. So I'll wait till I take that off tonight or tomorrow, and then I'll put a tape on him. But yeah, that was one of those. Damn, I wish it was bigger, but especially having Tyson around. But I still haven't got a picture of him yet since that day, November 3rd. So I know I got 2 neighbors that are hunting pretty hard, but he's made it this far. I'm betting on him that maybe he'll stick around, and he's pretty smart. He stays in the thick stuff, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not always the inches of the rack. I mean, the opportunity and just the whole situation and how stuff happens, like that's a big part of it too. Like, you know, yeah, we always want to shoot the biggest deer possible, but sometimes the situation makes it worth it, you know, and shooting one on the ground and having all those deer running all over the place. And it's cool when it happens. I mean, when I killed my bow buck last year, same thing. I mean, I was in a stand, but there was one hot doe and a dozen bucks running in and out and, you know, grunting and snort wheezing and fighting. And it was crazy. You don't see that all the time. So it's pretty cool to, if you have that opportunity and you do see something like that, you know, maybe the inches take a back seat and you go off the experience.
Oh yeah, the hunt itself. I mean, I don't know that I've had a funner hunt recently. I was sending you guys some in the group some Snapchats of just the bucks coming in and out, and then that 8 just thrashing a tree, and he gets ran off, and just the experience of having I don't know. I think at one time I had 5 bucks under 90 yards, and I was just sitting right next to the tree. I had a small little fork horn run right down the trail that I was on. He had been less than 5 feet from me. I had no idea I was there. I was just leaned up against the tree holding my bow. So I mean that the experience I'll never get one like that in a while. Like I said, you're experiencing from the tree that one hot doe and those what those bucks do, and they throw caution to the wind. And I was standing there sort of pretty much in the open,
Yeah.
but I'll take it. So
Right.
now we're sort of shifting gears, and I got my boy. He works a lot. He works in a welding shop and fabricating and stuff. So he's trying to get out. My wife will go. She'll go during gun season. She likes to sit in the blind, the heated blind, and she's not one for the cold. So I'm just going to try and focus for the later season coming up here. And myself, I have not shot a deer with my recurve, so I've been practicing with that down in the basement and at the property. And I'm going to try and shoot a doe with my recurve and get my first longbow kill, I guess you can call it. So
Nice.
till we hit
Yeah,
late season.
it seems like deer are starting to switch back to the food. My cameras for the last week have been pretty dead, all things considered. I mean, just, a lot of them are still on scrapes and whatnot, and we'll get into gun season here in Iowa, and I party hunt first season, and then you get into second season. My kids that still have both their tags, so I'll do a little bit of that, but I'm probably going to go through the properties that I have and pull probably 80% of my cameras for the year, and then move the other ones onto food sources or trails going to food sources, and just see if I can pin something down for late season. Unfortunately, most of my food on all of my farms is not a lot. I mean, I got a little bit of corn on my farm, a little bit of beans, a little bit of brass, like a whole bunch of a little bit of stuff. Um, and hopefully this spring I can get you away for a day and with your skid loader. I got a plan. My buddy I bought the farm from, so it's a 40-acre farm, and 27 or 28 acres of it is CRP. So that's all planted. That's going to grow up, but I have probably another 3 or 4 acres of waterways that are basically useless. They do a little bit of erosion control, but not as much as you would think. So what my plan is I want to get in there and brush hog it. So you'd have a new skid loader with a mower and all that stuff on it, will be a lot more effective than anything I have. And go to a couple of these waterways and just scalp them so I can kill them, and then disc them up. And I'm gonna plant uh, corn, sorghum, sunflower. Just basically a hodgepodge of food on 2 or 3 of these waterways besides my food plots. So those will just, I'll let go. Whatever happens, happens. And then I think I might just go corn in both of my food plots next year. I don't. The deer love the beans in my small plot, but it's almost completely gone already.
You ever think about clover? You have room to
I
put a
have
lot of clover in?
so I have clover on where my beans are at. I probably have, oh, a third to half an acre of clover, and the deer love it. And I'm gonna keep that. So that's like, that spot's a little over an acre because I have 2 acres allotted out of the CRP. Like, it's not in the CRP program. So I need to talk to the NRCS and see about if I have any allowance to like a certain percentage of food in the CRP program, because if I do, I can expand those a little bit more. If not, it's not such a big deal because I have a little bit of, I've carved some out next to the timber, right on the edge of the timber. So I have another 10 feet of clover I can put in, which I did this last year. So based off of where all that's at, I'm going to keep that clover, but I think I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. I'm probably going to take 10 yards off of it and make the green plot smaller to leave room for more uh grain.
Right.
And I'm gonna fence it. Like I said, I don't have a ton of deer in the summer, but as soon as it got to fall, like man, the deer started showing up, and I pulled the fence on my beans right before youth season,
Mm.
and I ended up taking my kids somewhere else, and they never killed a deer anyways. But the deer pressure, like early season, there were a dozen does and fawns in there every single night. They would eat in the clover, and then they'd go over to the beans, and it's all but non-existent. The nice thing was I did overseed multiple times with brassicas just to like, hey, I
Put
hope
something down.
hope this works. But then we didn't have any rain when I did it.
Yep.
But it hasn't gotten cold. It's what is it? It's November 22nd. Today's like the first cold day, besides one day late October that it
Yep.
got way down. But we've had probably 5 inches of rain in the last month.
Oh yeah.
And my brassicas have absolutely exploded.
My
I don't think they're gonna build bulbs, but the greens,
yep.
like it wasn't there in my bean stubble. And I sat last night and I'm like, there's a lot of, you can see green coming out.
Even my
So
established greens, like my sugar mama plot, I called it that. I did that domain plot, and from having no rain when we normally expected, they grew, then they sort of just stopped.
yep,
And then I've been getting pictures, like you said. I've noticed the same transition where my food plots are getting hit a little bit more. I'm seeing does starting to pair back up too. I've been having a lot of single does. Now I have does with either their fawns again, or like last
yep,
night I had 5 does by themselves in one plot. And now that those cameras are starting to get a little more active, I see during daylight they're very green, like bright
yeah,
green. I mean, even my lawn, my
yep,
lawn's green back up and coming up. So I mean, that's obviously it's a positive effect, which I'm like looking forward to for the late season. Um, yeah, I will. Like I said, I want to get down there and give you a hand with that. We just, like I said, we got that new skid loader with the equipment and got a lot of work on the property to still do here. But now my battle is I got to find a trailer. I went and looked at one the other day, but unfortunately it wasn't what I was looking for. I need to find something that's a minimum 14,000 pounds. So got to get a trailer. I think we have the insurance thing taken care of. There was with the way we purchased it, and they're trying to list it as commercial, and we're into personal for
right,
insurance reasons. And then until that gets taken care of before it leaves, and then yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it. I know I'm going to take your idea. Didn't even think about it, but when you guys came out and looked, and that's the benefit of having so many different people, guys you trust and friends at your property and how to improve it. When I clear that back area, I do want to get that grass burned off to promote fresh growth and that CRP stuff for bedding and thicket. But I think I want to put a lot more of that willows and like dogwood.
yeah. Red osier dogwood. It's
Sorry.
a lot of people don't know that it's so willows, like just that grow along creeks and rivers, and red osier dogwood are a great food source. They are fast growing, and you can transplant them. So
Yep.
you basically cut a live stem, like in almost in the winter, like
Yep.
February, March. You cut them, and you can just, as soon as it starts warming up, you just take it and you just stick it 5, 6 inches in the ground and walk away.
I was talking to a buddy of mine back home in New York about it, and they did 500 of each of the same thing in a little thicket area. And it's sort of like you said, it's along a waterway
Yep.
because I had nothing to do with it and we don't really have to worry about erosion. They turned it into a willow and dogwood thicket. And this was about 5 years ago. That you wouldn't believe how many deer go into that and either just bed or bucks will take does into it because it's
Yep.
phenomenal. It's thick, but it's not. He goes, you can traverse it if you need to. He goes, we just went in there. And he goes, we planted 500 expecting 300 of them to grow. And he goes, and it was a little bit better than that. He said they just cut them at an angle and just shoved them in about 8 to 10 inches in the ground. And
Yep.
like you said, early spring, March, he goes, it's right before turkey season. They did it back home. Theirs don't start till May. But, and I thought about once I get that area in the back cleaned up, all that down trees. And I don't know what those trees I have are. They're just thick. It's sort of like a multiflora that took over and grew.
Right.
Uh, get rid of a lot of that crap down there and just put some a little bit more structure. I want that grasses down there, that CRP for that bedding for the does, fawns, and those bucks used to run crazy in there. I remember before derecho, I'd only go in there. We called it the sanctuary. Me and the neighbor hunted sort of real close to the fence line. We're real respectful of another. He sold since then, but we'd only go in there 2 or 3 times a year, period. And just the
Right.
amount of sign we'd see and bucks on cameras taking does in there and just cruising, scent checking them. And I sort of want to get it back to that and putting some of that willows in there, that dogwood, even on the other side of my creek, and where I don't access as much, but just make it draw attention to the deer. And then I just want to get them more food sources down there for them too.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the dogwood and whatnot. It's such a multifaceted thing. Like they browse on it like crazy, especially up north. Like you see a lot more of it like Wisconsin,
Hmm.
northern Minnesota, but I mean Iowa gets cold and all that stuff too, but it can get really thick. It grows fast. It spreads on its own. Like I have it a ton in my ditch, like the actual road ditch right by my farm. There's thousands of sprouts. It's just, and every year it gets mowed off and it just explodes. So I'm probably gonna I'm gonna just cut a bunch of that and I'll in this spring and I'll just transfer it into a couple of these little waterway fingers and hopefully 5 years down the road it'll thicken up really well. And I got one that I'm actually gonna get a bunch of willows. Like I'm gonna figure out where I can find a bunch, and I mean hundreds of five, six, seven, 800 of them, and it's just a little runs north south that goes up to my road, and it's already a waterway, and I'm just gonna put them all in there and just give the deer a little bit of comfort that close to
Yeah.
the road because it already gets hit. I got a camera on it with a scrape I found, and the big buck I'm after actually had a doe locked down there all day one day on camera, 50 yards off the road. But
Yep.
it's thick enough right there that they feel comfortable, and I just want to make it that much better. So that
Absolutely. Just keep adding to it.
yeah, that 2 foot tall brome grass isn't doing anything. Like I said, that's the difference with the waterways. I can't really. It's not in the CRP program. I can plant whatever I want there. That's the best part. So if I wanted to
Yeah.
burn it, mow it, I can plant switchgrass. I can plant sorghum. I can plant miscanthus. Whatever I want to. I can plant beans. I can plant corn. And I think that's kind of my plan. What I want to do is overload a lot of this stuff with food because there's a ton of quail on the farm. There's pheasants on the farm. There's turkeys that fluctuate in and out, and it's never going to hold turkeys, but that section holds turkeys. So it's one of
Yeah.
those things. And I had birds on it this spring, but they kind of make this big loop, and it's like, well, do you really go and sit there if you don't know
Open.
that they're right there?
Right.
So
No, I hear you there. Speaking of all that, I have a big project with the same thing, and I got to get familiar with some of these programs. Another team member, Greg Ryan, was talking to me about it. We've got a 200-acre farm in Lisbon, and it's primarily all crop ground. It was shaped sort of like a dog. If you looked at like a dog laying on the ground, 2 legs, the body, and then where the head would be of timber. A lot of it got, I'd say, 50 to 55% of it was all knocked over and destroyed from that derecho. We're still seeing the effects of it, but I want to go in there. Our goal is get a lot of that dead shit out. We'll burn it, whatever. And there's programs you can plant windbreaks on the north and west sides of your property, 3 rows. And I watched an episode Jared Mills did on a farm he bought where he just went on and planted a ton of trees coming out uh, from their timber just to create more structure and
yeah,
source. And we sort of want to do the same thing. I want to build it up. Will I ever see it in my lifetime? Who knows? But it'll stay around forever and just it holds some deer, not a lot because there's a lot of when the crops are in, there's deer in there like crazy. During shotgun season, we usually sit it because they'll run from the neighbors that get pushed, and I don't push any of my property just because I don't have a lot of timber to hold the deer. They just sort of pass through all the time. It's a
right.
connecting between 2 big spots. And I mean, just this last week, a good friend of mine that works at another prison, he killed 190-inch, 20-something point buck just a half mile down the road. I know the timber really well, but they come off that timber, they cross the road, hit mine, and they just pass through it to go to the other bigger timber. So I'm a big transition area, which is nice. I've had a good friend of mine kill a great bow buck in there. We've killed some bucks during shotgun season, but it just doesn't have anything like you said. There's no structure there. So we want to get a lot more planted. So I got to look into some of these programs and get the ball rolling and just either recruit some of my friends or kids to come in there and just get a bunch of these things planted and established that hopefully 5-10 years down the road we'll start seeing some return on it. with wildlife. And there's pheasants in there like crazy. My wife's grandfather, when he initially bought the farm, that's what it was for. It was pheasant hunting. I know 2 years ago, I think it was the 22 deer season during second season shotgun, where I was out there sitting with a buddy of mine, and it sounds elaborate, but we watched probably 30 to 40 pheasants walk by, and I counted 15 roosters. They were coming down the waterway. Now I got my 450, and so does he. So I mean, we're not going to shoot them, but it was pretty cool to sit there and at 30 yards, watch 15 rooster pheasants come through it's like a waterway with some trees in it and stuff.
Yep.
So it was sort of cool to hear that that's what her grandfather bought it for, and they're still around. And a lot of the neighbors, they say that there's always pheasants on our farm, but I don't pheasant hunt as much as I wish I could, just because it interferes with deer season. And usually, if I got a tag, I'm going after deer than I am pheasants. But
Yeah.
it's one of those. It's so open, you can miss them if you don't have a dog. There's not a lot of grasses there at CRP, so I need to educate myself a little bit more on what we can do on putting some more CRP in and some more trees and structure.
Yeah.
So, and that's like I said, we'll sit down and we'll look at it with you guys that have more knowledge base on what I can do and what's best for the farm.
Yeah, and that's the fun part. Like I said, my farm's just 40 acres, but I've enjoyed so much, like all the different tweaks. And like I put in a little food plot that was way back in this. It was just grass, but back in my cedar thicket, and put a food plot in it this year. And I mean, the funny thing is my cell camera's going off, and there's deer in it right now. I'm getting pictures of them walking all over the place, and I actually put that plot in for this big deer I'm after, because this late November, he was there all the time in daylight. So I haven't seen him in about a week, but hopefully he shows back up. I'm going to try to get out this afternoon and hunt, because all I have left right now is landowner tag. I filled my statewide bow tag. So I'm just kind of playing the game of be there when he shows up instead of reacting. I want to be
Get ahead of
active
them.
to
Yeah,
get ahead of him. So when he shows up, like, all right, well, I can hunt. I'm going to get in there and hunt,
that's that's definitely a big lesson I learned. I used to react to my cameras like, oh, he's there, so now I was always tailing the deer
Yep.
instead of where was he at last year. And that's what I learned from Swoops. I was like, he's gonna hit that food plot. I know where he's gonna go. He's got a pattern of doing it when he shows up, what ridge he comes off of. So the second he started doing that within a week of that cold front, I knew where he'd be, and I got in front of him, started waiting for his pictures. And that was something it took me a long time to finally figure out. And once you do it, you start putting puzzle pieces together, and he was there late last November, and he's got a habit, and he's been in there recently. Well, now get ahead of him and just be there when he's there.
Yep.
And
Yep. If
my
he's still
buddy back
alive.
home just my buddy back home just killed a really nice one for New York, upstate New York. Um, he's building a new home, and he's got only like an 8 to 10 acre parcel, but he can hunt on it. And the framer said they saw a pretty good deer, and he's been getting pictures of this big buck for New York. And he keeps waiting for him to daylight. And I said, Kyle, every day he's getting closer and closer to daylighting. You need to be there before he daylights. Like, you need to put your time in. He was going to leave to go to his camp in the southern tier, we call it. And I said, you have big deer in camera. Almost every day you're getting pictures of this deer. And each time he's closer and closer to daylight, whether it's the evening hunt or the morning hunt. And the day before, he was there at like 4:30 in the morning, and he showed up 25 minutes after legal shooting light in the evening. I said, one more day, he's going to daylight. I guarantee it. So he hunted that morning yesterday. And it's funny, they're building a house. So he's sitting in the house. It's just a frame structure, timbers and stuff. And the framer's going to be there at 8:30 in the morning. About an hour before they got there, about 7:30, the deer steps out and he hits them. And I ended up scoring. He called me last night, 153 and change.
Oh,
So
wow.
for an upstate New York, it was that's a big deer,
Right.
especially in our area, Niagara County. And so it was just one of those. He's like, man, I don't think I would have went, because he goes, I have no daylight pictures. He was waiting for him to daylight. I said, I've
Yep.
learned this lesson. And then now you're going to be behind him. So get there, put the time in, and it paid off. So
Yeah.
it was pretty
You
cool
just,
to.
and that's the thing. You gotta, I've learned, and whether it's the same deer or it's the same location, like there's certain spots that get fired up at certain times a year.
Yep.
A certain scrape, a certain draw, a certain pinch, that every year, the first week in November, the third week in November, the last week you know of October, that this spot always picks up. So I mean, I'd hate to know how many trail cam pictures I have. And ever since cell cameras, I don't save a lot like I used to. Like I save the big ones on my phone, and then when I go through at the end of the year, when I pull cameras, I still go through the cards. Every single card I go through, and because
There's some that you miss, some that don't get sent.
there's 100% some that you get missed, or you know, I've noticed like I had a camera just kind of quit sending pictures, and then I synced it after like a week. Well, then it actually sent them to me, but it was in chronological order, so it was back to a week in my app.
Yep.
So I think that happens a lot too.
Yep.
Or like
Yeah.
you don't have great service and you miss a night or something like that, and then all of a sudden it sends and bam, there it is.
Hmm.
So it's either really windy or there's deer running all over my farm because my camera is just buzz, 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 buzz. I'm
I can
like,
see my app above going off.
yep,
It's a lot of my wild game cameras are just I keep getting a little blink.
yeah,
So I had a lot of actually really small bucks last night and does. One property, a lot of does were being ran by some small. It's a transition area. There's no food. Yeah, a lot of acorns and food. Austin hunted it. Um, every now and then a big one shows up. A neighbor of mine, or neighbor, a buddy of mine, lives maybe a mile down the road from the spot, and he's got some absolute hammers on camera. I've been helping him. He tore his shoulder. He killed a buck early this year. He went to hang it in his barn, and I offered. He's like, "Oh, I got it." He tore his shoulder, so now he's crossbow hunting. He's got a lifetime crossbow permit, but he's one of those. I'm not using it if I don't have to. He
right,
busted it out, and it's an old one. We got it sighted in for him and stuff. I went and took one of my ground blinds and set it up. We actually put a. I told him to get a cedar post. He's got a small food plot, and I said, just get this small cedar post, put it in the middle, something for him to focus on. We'll put a branch over it for a licking branch, and let's put a camera on it. Just give them something to focus on, so if they come in, you can shoot. He brings in a cedar tree that's I'm talking bigger than my waist. I mean, it's huge. I'm like, Gary, what are you doing? We get an auger, and I mean, it was too much to shovel, so we got an auger. We plant it in the ground, and then you're not going to knock it over. He
right.
has had more bucks hit this tree and studs. I mean, 170s, 160s, and just shredding. There's pine shavings all over the base of the tree. It's not out of the ground, thank God. I mean, we put it about 35 inches in the ground, and they're just hammering it. I couldn't believe it. So I think I'm going to do the same to mine. But he's now hunting. He's got a ground blind. I brushed it about 25 yards from this post, and but some of those deer, what I was getting to, I've seen on my cameras as well, but they're more so around him. He's got food, he's got water, he's got good structure. We're just sort of a transition area where there's a real nasty thicket, multiple rows and thorns and all that stuff, and then it hits
Right.
hardwoods. And I hunt right where they meet, and that's where Austin was that night. He saw that big one, and but yeah, those cameras have been going off all night. But it's a lot of little fork horns, little 1.5-year-olds, but does, and they're hauling ass on does. So they might be those last does, or maybe they're ones that they're trying to get before the big ones get to them.
Yeah,
But
I feel like some of the older deer are still with does, um, and they're just not moving.
yep,
Um, and they'll come off. I think the vast majority of the does are bred already. I don't know what number, 75. Let's just call it 75% at this point. And you always get some that go into late October, early November. Um, you never know. So it's just trying to get out there and focus back on food, in my opinion, at this point.
yep,
And you know, I'm probably done with the mornings unless I start. If I get a deer that's pretty consistent in the morning. But the bad part about my farm is since it's the first year CRP planting, it's only 8 inches tall. So,
right.
and they
Access
can
is
see
tough.
me. They can see me walking in. So
Yep,
it's tough. And the last, so it was Sunday. I walked in and my cameras were going off. Like I'm walking in, and there's deer running all over. I'm like, oh God, how am I going to get in here? And I get like 20 yards away from my stand, and I can just smell deer, smell the buck
yep.
and all this stuff. And I take two more steps and just a doe. I can just hear a deer take off, and then I just hear a bruh, 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 buck grunting after her. So she probably heard me, saw me, and took off. And
He
he
just
went
followed.
right at. He didn't care. Went right after her, and I'm 99% sure it was my big that hometown 10 I've been after because the other three bucks were on camera like an hour later. So
Yeah,
without does, just walking around. So I'm like, okay, that's what happened is they were right underneath my stand in that finger, and I bumped her, and I haven't seen him since. So I'm in my head, I'm like, man, I really hope I didn't bump him to somebody else. But
right.
you know, the neighbors hunt a little bit. I don't know. So in my head, I'm like, man, I have zero confirmation for almost a week. This is the since I started getting pictures of him in October. This is the longest he's been gone. So I'm
Yeah,
getting kind of nervous, and he's the only deer that's old enough to shoot on the farm right now.
and that's the problem. Is I have two new neighbors that one, they hunt a little bit. I've seen some stands go up. I think he probably made gun hunts. I see him driving his ATV a lot, and they were cutting firewood. The guy who used to live behind me sold to a new guy, and it's that, I don't want to share too much information. What are they hunting? What are they not? Because then they might change their methods when they know what's in there, and it's burning the past. Where Ben, my prior neighbor, we were really open about what we had. He was traditionally a recurve shooter primarily, and he only went after big deer. He's like 4 or 5 and older, and he held to it. And he was, we were really open about what deer we had, and we'd share pictures. And now the new guy, it's like, do I risk it? Because it's burning the past. So it's one of those, I don't know that I want to really open up just to see, because that Tyson, I don't know where he's at, but I don't want to be hunting a deer that's dead. And
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's one of them feeling out processes, and you want to be cordial with your neighbors. I mean,
yep,
you do what you can. Sometimes neighbors just don't want to be cordial with you. They don't. I deal with it. I mean,
I've had one of those, and yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've had one too, and they're moved on, thankfully, my issue. But the new guy, it's like a one of those houses, like barn dominiums.
okay.
There's a little cabin on it, so they don't live there on site, but they're there, a lot during hunting season. I've been in my stand before when what I call the sanctuary, and I've heard him rattling, so I don't even call or nothing. I don't want him to even know I'm down in there. And it's one of those, I thought about going up after and just seeing how things are going. You watch anything, but I also don't want to ask him what he's seeing. I mean, not tell him anything. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
just sort of got to try to meet him on neutral ground and see what he's about and what they're hunting
Yeah.
for. Because I know the first year they bought the property, I was going after a pretty big 8 that I shared pictures of you guys. An opening day late muzzleloader. His son, first sit of the day on their, ag field they had, killed him.
Yeah.
Just so happy, and he was really regular on my property in my food plots. Opening day late muzzleloader, he smokes them. Ben sends me a message that night. Hey, have you ever seen this deer? And I was like, yeah. Ben had already sold, so I didn't share anything. And I sent him all my trail camera pictures I had. I said, hey, send these to the kid. I don't care. He was like an 18, 19-year-old kid. It was his first buck on the property. Happy for them, but it's like, man. So
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely a thing, like if you knew that there's not a lot of deer, you may not, if you have other places to hunt, you may not hunt there. But as soon as you're like, hey, yeah, I got this 170. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'm going to start hunting more. So, I mean, there's a
yep,
fine line to, I don't think anybody tells everybody everything. I just don't think so. I mean, we
yeah.
even have you know, me and another guy in the team share very close farms, and we have had the same deer go back and forth and back and forth. And we kind of, I think we let each other know enough, but we're not spilling the whole beans on everything
You can't
both
have deer with
ways.
that caliber. I mean, it's just we
No.
understand. There's no
And,
everyone
and
respects
yeah,
it
there's
and
no
knows why.
animosity. If he shoots it, he shoots it. I just told him, I was like, you shoot it, you better get that thing on video, you know.
Yeah,
And I could have killed him 10 times after I filled my bow tag. That's the sickening part. So this is the last year I ever shoot a good deer if I have a great deer on camera. That I learned my lesson this year. And any other year, if this deer wasn't running around still, I wouldn't hesitate. The deer I shot is at least 5, if not 6 or 7 years old, huge body,
great
big
deer. Yeah.
big heavy mid-50s deer, and it was awesome. Great hunt. Rattled him right in. It was awesome. But yeah, getting daylight pictures of a very, very big deer right next to your stands when you can't do anything about it sucks.
Yep, that's what I told my wife. I said, if Tyson showed up right now, there's nothing I can do until shotgun or late muzzleloader.
Yeah.
So, like I said, she's got a shotgun tag. I've got landowner tags for shotgun and late muzzleloader. I got my statewide late muzzleloaders tag, but my son's got his bow tag as well. My wife has a bow tag, but trying to get her out away from a blind during the cold is tough. I get it. She's
Yeah.
not as dedicated as we are, but
I don't like
if
it
she does,
either. I'll be honest. If
yeah,
I can hunt out of a blind with a heater when it's cold, sign me up. I'm
yeah.
not
She's
afraid to
already
go get
got
hurt.
the biggest buck in the house, and she likes to let me know. So she's like, "Well, I'll let you get this one," and so it's a fun tease, but we have fun with it.
Right. Sweet. Well, that's a good one. 40 minutes or so. We'll kind
Yeah,
of end on that note, and hopefully we can get back after it and get some deer killed, and it'll all be over before you know it. I mean,
yeah. We'll be
literally,
talking about turkey season here before you know it. Get out of state and get a few birds down and deer classic. Meet everybody on the team again. It's a good time. But good luck
no.
to you guys and everybody else. Like I said, I'm just looking forward to the snow to start flying and get on these plots late season.
Yeah, it should be fun. I got a couple doe tags I need to fill, and I might go do that one of these nights. So
Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna try to bring the recurve and make it happen. I'm 20 yards and under. That's about it for me.
I got a spot. It's where that big deer is. Um, that it's probably under 15 yards, and I really want to take my recurve, but I don't shoot it enough. I just don't, and maybe someday, maybe one of these years, I'll be like, you know what, they filter right through here. It'll be easy to do,
Yeah,
but I don't want to wound a deer. I need to, and this probably would have been the perfect year to do it because leave my compound at home. I just have a doe tag. I'm going to sit a spot where we call it the campground. It's right where we have a big fire pit where the landowner does, and they funnel out from the other property, come right through this gap, and they're anywhere between 3 and 15 yards. They funnel right through, and I'm just like, man, I should probably recurve this one of these times, maybe next year, but
yeah.
we'll see. But yeah,
Dude, this spring,
sounds good.
let's bring them for turkey season. But
Uh, maybe,
all right,
maybe. All
good talking
right.
to you, man.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.